Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal, Dahiya, and you're watching the news where we bring you details of all day's developments across the country and the world. But let's begin with the headlines first. India and Britain agree on comprehensive bilateral defence and security alliance. Prime Minister Modi and his British counterpart Boris Johnson hold summit meeting in Delhi. Free trade agreement by year-end. India and Britain appeal for ceasefire in Ukraine, return to dialogue and diplomacy. Both nations push for open, inclusive and rule-based Indo-Pacific region. And a big terror plot foiled ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Jammu. 2 terrorists killed in attacks on CISF convoy in Sunjwan. ASI martyred. Finance Minister reiterates India's commitment to fight money laundering and terror funding at FATF ministerial meet in Washington. Holds discussion with CEOs of US companies including FedEx and MasterCard. And Prime Minister Modi calls Earth Day an opportunity to express gratitude to the country, reaffirm resolve to save Mother Earth. Let's look at some more important news items quickly. Now, DefConnect 2.0, a celebration of growth of Indian defence startup ecosystem, says Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Niti Aayog, UNICEF, India signed statement of intent on SDGs with focus on children. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reiterates disengagement and de-escalation way forward along northern borders. Union Minister Nitin Gadkari says expert committee to probe electric two-wheelers mishap. CBI files charge sheet against former NSE CEO Chitra Ramakrishna and Anand Subramanian in alleged co-location scam case. Prime Minister Modi to visit Samba district in Jammu for Panchayati Raj Divas on 24th of April. Manipur to celebrate Khonjom Day tomorrow at Khonjom War Memorial Complex. 8.2% IMF growth projection during 2022-23 makes India fastest growing economy, says Nirmala Sitharaman. Leaders of rival Koreas exchange letters expressing hope for improved bilateral relations. 3 more cabinet ministers and junior rank ministers take oath in first expansion of Pakistan cabinet. And time now for all these news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday said India and United Kingdom will do their part to conclude the free trade agreement by end of this year. Addressing a joint press briefing after the summit meeting with his UK counterpart Boris Johnson in New Delhi, Modi said teams of both countries are working on FTA and good progress is being made in the negotiations. Prime Minister Modi also said both leaders reviewed the progress made in Roadmap 2030 that will guide the bilateral relationship in this decade. He said they also discussed the comprehensive reforms in India, infrastructure modernization plan and the national infrastructure pipeline. He welcomed the growing investment in India by UK companies. He said they decided to deepen climate and energy partnership and invited UK to join India's national hydrogen mission. In a statement, visiting Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the partnership between India and Britain is one of the defining friendships of the times. Current regional and international developments on Ukraine, Afghanistan and the Indo-Pacific region formed a major part of the discussion between Prime Minister Modi and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Prime Minister Modi welcomed Britain's decision to join the Indo-Pacific initiative. He urged both Ukraine and Russia to return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy for an immediate ceasefire. He also reiterated his support for a peaceful, stable and secular Afghanistan, as well as an inclusive and representative government there. Prime Minister Modi said Afghanistan's land should not be used to spread terrorism in other countries. The two leaders stressed the need to maintain an open, inclusive and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific region.
हमने यूक्रेन में तुरंत युद्ध विराम और समस्या के समाधान के लिए डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी पर बल दिया। हमने सभी देशों की क्षेत्रीय अखंडता और संप्रभुता के सम्मान का महत्व भी दोहराया। एक फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव एंड रूल बेस्ड ऑर्डर पर आधारित इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र बनाए रखने पर हमने जोर दिया।
We don't tolerate extremist groups setting up in the UK with a view to causing threatening other countries, threatening India. But what we've done in particular as a result of this visit is set up an anti-extremist task force. We don't welcome people who want to use our legal system to evade the law here in India. So let me be absolutely clear about that.
Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was accorded a traditional welcome in the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan. The British Prime Minister was received by Prime Minister Modi on his arrival and given a guard of honour. Johnson thanked the Prime Minister for the warm welcome. He said India-UK relations are at their strongest and in the best phase. The British Prime Minister also visited Rajghat in the morning. He paid floral tributes at the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial. And for more on this, we're joined by our colleague Teena Jha. Teena, good evening and welcome. A lot of discussion which took place between the two Prime Ministers today. The key focus seems to be on defence and trade partnership. What are the main takeaways from the bilateral summit and this visit?
Well, you know, Vishal, Boris Johnson's visit to India, two-day visit to India has been extremely significant for several reasons. One, because it's his first visit to India since becoming Prime Minister. Second, because this was a long pending visit. You would recall on two previous occasions, his visit to the country had to be cancelled in the wake of rising cases in both countries. And also because it comes in a year when both countries are commemorating 75 years of their bilateral ties, and also when India is celebrating its 75th year of independence from the British rule. So, you know, in terms of optics, in terms of symbolism, there's been a lot to witness. Interestingly, Boris Johnson began his visit from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's home state of Gujarat. So you would have seen visuals yesterday. He was accorded a very, very colourful reception in Ahmedabad. And then from there on, he went to visit the Sabarmati ashram. He tried his hand at spinning Gandhiji's charkha as well. So in terms of optics, in terms of symbolism, hugely significant. And now talking about the substance, so on day two of his visit to India, Boris Johnson did meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi today in New Delhi, and both leaders held talks, wide-ranging talks, I would say, on different sectors, on key issues on which both countries are engaging. So particularly trade and investment, commerce, defense and security, and also clean energy. In fact, Vishal, on the much-awaited, much-touted free trade agreement that both countries on which the talks are underway between both countries currently, both countries did express satisfaction that a good amount of progress has already been made, and now a timeline, in fact a deadline has been set for the end of October, by which both leaders expect that talks would have concluded, and by end of Diwali, that's in fact to quote the British Prime Minister, by the end of Diwali both countries should have a comprehensive free trade agreement, which is going to benefit both countries hugely. On the aspect of deepening defense and security cooperation, there have been agreements that there is a need to enhance and expand defense and security partnership between both countries. And also, interestingly, you would see that the United Kingdom has now sort of devised a new policy in which there is an Indo-Pacific tilt. So on that front also, there have been shared concerns by both countries on ensuring that the Indo-Pacific region is free, open and inclusive. Vishal.
Optics, but a lot of substance as well when we're talking about British Prime Minister's visit to India, and a focus on bilateral cooperation in defense, strategic affairs, security, regional security, and trade and commerce, of course. Let's move on now. Ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Jammu, security forces foiled a plan to spread terror in the region. In the last 24 hours, security forces killed 6 terrorists in separate encounters. Terrorists targeted a bus of CISF personnel while changing shifts near the army camp in Sujwan at around 4 a.m. 2 terrorists were killed in the attack. An ASI was martyred and 9 Jawans were injured in this attack. Police said the terrorists were planning to carry out a Fidain attack.
इसमें जो दोनों दहशतगर्द मारे गए हैं इनका जैश मोहम्मद के साथ ताल्लुक है। ये दोनों ही दहशतगर्द सुसाइड वेस्ट पहन के आए थे ताकि जब कभी अच्छा एंगेजमेंट सिक्योरिटी फोर्स या किसी एक कैंप के ऊपर हो जाता तो ये सुसाइड वेस्ट को ब्लास्ट करने के बाद गोलाबारी खत्म होने के बाद मरने से पहले और भी बड़ा नुकसान कर सकते थे।
In the Baramulla district of Jammu and Kashmir, the security forces killed 4 terrorists in an operation that has been going on for more than 24 hours. Top Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Yusuf Kantru was also among the terrorists. Kantru's death is being considered a big success for the security forces. Union Home Minister Amit Shah said in the last 8 years, the Modi government has achieved great success in solving problems like Kashmir issue, Naxalism and narcotics and armed groups in the Northeast region. Inaugurating the 48th All India Police Science Congress in Bhopal, Amit Shah said there is a need for modernization and training of the police force to strengthen the internal security of the country. He said the data is the new science and big data is the solution to all the problems.
क्योंकि अब कुछ क्राइम ऐसे आ गए हैं जिसके सामने पुलिस के मॉडर्नाइजेशन और ट्रेनिंग के बगैर, पुलिस के राज्य के भीतर समन्वय के बगैर और पुलिस के राज्य के बाहर समन्वय के बगैर और टेक्नोलॉजी को आत्मसात करे बगैर लड़ पाना असंभव।
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Friday appreciated the role of FATF's global network in safeguarding the global financial system. She also reiterated India's commitment to fight against money laundering and terror funding. The Finance Minister was attending the FATF ministerial meeting in Washington. She said India supports the strategic priorities of FATF and is committed to providing necessary resources for this. The Finance Minister also attended a dinner for members of the Development Committee in Washington. Speaking on the occasions, he said tackling the challenges of conflict and violence is essential to win the war against poverty and promote prosperity. She added that women, youth and children should always be given priority in critical and conflict situations in FCS countries. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman also met CEOs of big US companies like FedEx and MasterCard. She highlighted the investment opportunities in India. Sitharaman will be attending the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Let's now take a look at some more news from across the nation. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla on Friday arrived in Cambodia and after his Vietnam visit and met the President of Senate. Both leaders held talks on bilateral trade and expanding the rich and multifaceted ties of the two countries. Om Birla also held talks with the Speaker of the National Assembly of Cambodia on parliamentary cooperation and harnessing the full potential of bilateral relations. Union Home Minister Amit Shah held a roadshow in Bhopal. Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan was also present. Thousands of people greeted the Home Minister at the 2-kilometer-long roadshow from Link Road to the BJP office. Amit Shah met core committee members at the BJP office. The Jharkhand High Court granted bail to RJD chief and former Bihar Chief Minister Lalu Prasad Yadav in the last embezzlement case in the fodder scam from Doranda Treasury in Ranchi. Lalu Prasad is undergoing treatment in judicial custody at AIIMS Delhi. He has got bail in all of the 5 Ranchi fodder scam cases. Supreme Court refused bail to Maharashtra Cabinet Minister and NCP leader Nawab Malik in a money laundering case. The court said the investigation is still in its initial stages. It also said Malik to file a petition in the lower court. Delhi COVID cases touched 2,451 in the country on Friday. Active cases have gone up to 14,241. The Ministry of Health said active cases are 0.03% of the total infection in the country, while the national rate of recovery of patients is 98.75%. More than 187.26 crore doses of anti-COVID-19 vaccines have been administered so far under the nationwide vaccination campaign. The Delhi government issued new COVID guidelines for schools in the city. They make thermal scanning mandatory for students and staff. Students have also been instructed to avoid sharing food and stationery items. Parents have been advised not to send children to school if they are COVID positive. Time for a short break now, but on the other side, what was the effect of stringent lockdowns on controlling the COVID pandemic? This and more stories on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and in this half, let's start by taking a look at all the latest updates from the war front in Ukraine. Russia has said it plans to seize Donbas and southern Ukraine to gain access to Russia-backed Moldovan region Transnistria. Ukrainian officials have denounced the plan as imperialism. The United Nations Office for Human Rights has sounded the alarm over growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine, urging both Kiev and Moscow to order combatants to respect international law. Satellite images show mass graves near Mariupol, where officials say Russia is burying bodies to hide war crimes. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says no humanitarian corridor will be open across Ukraine on Friday due to the danger on the routes. Russia's defense ministry has said it is ready at any moment to allow a ceasefire and a humanitarian corridor for civilians at Mariupol's Azovstal steel plant if Ukrainian soldiers were to raise white flags. In a phone call with Putin, the EU Council has urged the Russian leader to open humanitarian corridors from the southern city of Mariupol. On a two-day visit to India, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson indicated there may be no swift end to the conflict in Ukraine because of the stiff resistance to Russian invasion. Johnson also said that UK is considering sending tanks to Poland so that Warsaw can send its own to Ukrainian forces. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan is planning to hold phone calls with his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts in the coming days, he said, adding that he hoped the calls could lead to a meeting in Turkey to end this war. And now some more news from other parts of the world as well. The Sri Lankan police transferred 3 top officers for alleged misconduct that led to the death of a protester in the violence in the southwestern region of Rambukana. Police had opened fire at unarmed anti-government protesters demonstrating against the latest fuel price hike. 1 person was killed and 13 others were injured. A special police team has been appointed to probe the incident and report within 3 days. The Sri Lankan government on Thursday deployed troops as a precautionary measure in Rambukana after lifting the curfew. The most stringent lockdown did not impact the mental health of people. In fact, it was the best way to check the COVID pandemic, is the conclusion of a latest study that considered data from countries like Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Spain and Sweden, along with Japan, Singapore and South Korea as well. Let's take a look. This was London when it imposed its COVID lockdown in March 2020. By May, restrictions were eased over concerns that curbs on social interaction could be affecting mental health. A study by medical journal Lancet Public Health now concludes that countries with the strictest lockdowns combated the COVID virus more successfully because there were fewer deaths. And there were no significant mental health benefits for people whose restrictions ended earlier. In fact, change in mental health was only 1/5 of that related to becoming unemployed. Denmark, Norway and Finland had the most stringent measures in Europe. They were termed the eliminators because they also adopted testing and contact tracing to prevent the spread of the virus. This also made later lockdowns unnecessary. France, UK and Germany, on the other hand, were mitigator countries that had several waves of lockdowns and failed to prevent spread of virus. The survey concludes that countries that tried to eliminate the coronavirus had the better approach. The assessment, however, stops before the wider distribution of vaccines began. India had one of the strongest lockdowns. According to the University of Oxford, in an index of 0 to 100, it had the highest score of 100 since March 2022-2020. Bureau Report, Sansad TV. Okay, so some more news from across the world now. French prosecutors issued an international arrest warrant for auto tycoon Carlos Ghosn, who fled Japan in 2019 for Lebanon. The warrant is based on 2019 investigation into money laundering and abuse of company assets, reportedly over millions in alleged suspect payments made between Renault-Nissan Alliance and Suhail Bahawan Automobiles, a vehicle distributor company in Oman owned by billionaire Suhail Bahawan. The former head of Nissan-Renault Alliance fled to Lebanon in late 2019 while out on bail, facing financial misconduct charges in Japan. Honduras extradited former President Juan Orlando Hernandez in the United States on Thursday to face drug trafficking and weapons charges. The leader was once touted by U.S. authorities as a key ally in the war on drugs. Just 3 months after leaving office, Hernandez boarded an aeroplane handcuffed with agents from U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration bound for the United States, where he faces charges in the Southern District of New York. Shanghai has extended its COVID-19 lockdown to 26th of April. The city of 26 million reported 11 more deaths on Thursday, taking the toll in the current outbreak to 36. The government has been easing quarantine rules in some compounds that have not seen COVID-19 cases for a period of time. Shanghai reported more than 17,629 new infected cases on Thursday, among which 15,698 were asymptomatic. The World Health Organization on Friday strongly recommended the use of Pfizer's antiviral pill Paxlovid in patients with mild and moderate forms of coronavirus disease, that is COVID-19, at the highest risk of hospitalization. The U.S. Health Agency, however, highlighted the challenges of availability and lack of price transparency in low and middle income countries, raising concerns that such countries may again be pushed to the end of the queue for accessing this treatment. Terror group Islamic State has claimed responsibility for 4 explosions across Afghanistan on Thursday, in which at least 31 people were killed and 87 were wounded. One of the blasts was carried out at a mosque in Mazar-e-Sharif. At least 10 people were killed and dozens injured in the blast. The first blast occurred in a public square in Kabul's Police District 5, in which many, including 2 children, were injured. And it's now the turn of news from the world of sports. As always, let's begin with the cricket first. Mumbai Indians and Chennai Super Kings may be at the bottom of IPL 15's points table, but when the two most successful teams of IPL with 9 titles between them are pitted against one another, cricket fans get their money's worth. Last night, in a high-octane clash, Chennai Super Kings defeated the Mumbai Indians on the last ball of the encounter, with the finishing touch provided by who else? The master himself, Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Batting first, Mumbai posted 155 for 7, chasing the target. Chennai needed 16 of the last 4 balls. Dhoni struck 6, 4, a double and a 4 on the last ball to settle the issue. On to boxing now. Heavyweight world champion Tyson Fury and challenger Dillian Whyte went face-to-face with respect and a handshake in the final news conference before their big fight at Wembley Stadium on Saturday. Fury's WBC title will be on the line when the 33-year-old Gypsy King faces former sparring partner, fellow Briton and top-ranked contender Whyte in front of a 94,000 sellout crowd. While Fury has an unbeaten record of 31 wins and a draw with 22 knockouts, Whyte has twice lost in 30 fights. And before we bring this bulletin to an end, let's take a quick look at the headlines once again. India and Britain agree on comprehensive bilateral defence and security alliance. Prime Minister Modi and his British counterpart Prime Minister Boris Johnson hold summit meeting in Delhi. Free trade agreement by year-end. India and Britain appeal for ceasefire in Ukraine, return to dialogue and diplomacy. Both nations push for open, inclusive and rule-based Indo-Pacific region. Big terror plot foiled ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Jammu. 2 terrorists killed in attack on CISF convoy in Sujua, ASI martyred. Finance Minister reiterated India's commitment to fight money laundering and terror funding at FATF ministerial meet in Washington, holds discussions with CEOs of US companies including FedEx and MasterCard. Prime Minister Modi calls Earth Day an opportunity to express gratitude to Mother Earth, reaffirms resolve to save the planet. That's all we have in this edition of the news. We'll come back again tomorrow with all the details from across the country and world. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.